Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws kept black and whites segregated. Public schools were provided for black children, but they were not as nice as schools for white children. Miscongeniation was not allowed. Voting rights restricted African Americans' rights to vote. In many public places, blacks and whites were not allowed to speak to each other or communicate with one another. Limits on voting rights. Southern states got around the 15th Amendment by passing multiple restrictive laws. Poll taxes required voters to pay $1 or $2 to vote. The states also required them to pass literacy tests. African Americans were poor and were denied education, so this prevented most from voting. Plessy versus Ferguson. A man by the name of Plessy went to the train car for whites, where he was required to sit in the train car for blacks, and said aloud that he was an African American. His case ended up being taken all the way to the Supreme Court, where they ruled segregation was legal as long as it was equal. Booker T. Washington versus Webb Du Bois. Booker T. Washington urged blacks to accept discrimination for the time being and concentrate on elevating themselves through hard work and mental prosperity. However, Webb disagreed with him and said that it would only aid whites. Webb helped fund the NAACP and said that blacks should stand up for themselves against whites and not let them be treated unfairly. Ida B. Wells. Born into slavery in 1862, she bought a local newspaper and renamed it Free Speech, and wrote many articles about the mistreatment of blacks. Local whites ran out of town while she was writing all of these articles. In 1880 to the 1900s, she worked on many newspapers. She traveled to Europe in 1893 to see how blacks were treated in other countries. Chinese immigrants and Mexican Americans faced discrimination. In the 1800s, Chinese immigrants and Mexican Americans faced off against white settlers in the West. Just like Native Americans, they were pushed off the land they had already settled and mistreated. In the 1800s, women had restrictive laws against them. They could not vote or have jobs.